This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated. Jihadist Psychopath by Dr. Jamie Glazov. I will tell you as an expert on Sharia, as a former child bride who has suffered and faced my own jihadi psychopath, I want you to go and order this book on Amazon.com or go to jamieglazov.com. Get a copy for yourself. You know why? Because you need to be equipped with the knowledge to fight our enemy so you can save your daughters and your granddaughters from future of Islam.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Glazov Gang. This is another Daniel Greenfield moment on the Glazov Gang. Today we're going to talk about the most glamorous place in America, Baltimore. There's no place on earth quite like Baltimore. My wife loves America. She loves absolutely every single part of America. She's the one who keeps saying, we need to go to South Dakota. I would say, what's in South Dakota? The Black Hills are in South Dakota. And she also tends to be quite oblivious to most of the unpleasantness of life that's taking place all around us. Thus, when we get into Union Station in Washington, D.C., and there are crazy, schizophrenic homeless people wandering around, shouting to themselves, cursing, and perhaps running for Congress, she's the one who's absolutely oblivious to it. Instead, she's enchanted by the sight of the Capitol in the moonlight. And yet, Baltimore is the one place on earth that my wife never wants to go back to again. She's very clear about this. There are any place in America that she would rather go than Baltimore. And who can possibly blame her? Baltimore is an absolutely lovely place. Baltimore is so vibrant, as the current mayor has said, and the current mayor has replaced a previous mayor and yet another previous mayor, a number of whom have had to resign before going to prison or before possibly going to prison. He said in response to Trump's comments that Baltimore just possibly might be a rat and rodent-infested, diseased hellhole. His response, the mayor said, Baltimore is a vibrant city, and it is indeed a vibrant city. It's so vibrant that its murder rate has climbed above that of Chicago and Detroit and other lovely Democrat metropolises. In fact, it's vibrating so much that in 2019, as of the current numbers, it has racked up, I believe, 191 murders. That's 191 murders. It's on track to beat its past records, which have made it actually one of the murder capital of America. Now, it became the murder capital of America when the previous mayor, actually, I'm sorry, I should correct myself because in Baltimore, the mayors come and go pretty quickly. The previous mayor, the mayor before the previous mayor, now, actually, let me backtrack a moment. The previous mayor, Catherine Pugh, was forced to resign over a scandal involving some dubious books. The current mayor was the former acting mayor. The mayor before Catherine Pugh, and I might be confusing myself a bit here, but the mayor before Catherine Pugh was Rawlings, who actually turned Metropolis into an even more vibrant place, or more vibrating place, when she announced that she was giving the rioters, after Freddie Gray's death, a space to destroy. And they did take the space to destroy. The murder rate in Baltimore went up 63%. Arrests were cut in half, and Baltimore became the envy of several warring genocidal nations because finally they had a place with an even worse murder rate. Anyway, you do tend to get Baltimore politicians confused because you hardly get to know their names before they go to jail. But in any case, the current mayor, who was until recently the acting mayor, who may or may not actually live in Baltimore, that was his previous scandal back in the council days, said in response to Trump's comments that Baltimore is a vibrant city, which it is indeed a vibrant city. Volcanoes are also very vibrant volcanoes, and burning buildings are very vibrant burning buildings. And by the way, Representative Elijah Cummings, who was at the center of Trump's current comments, did have his row house burn, one of his houses, by the way. It burned because Baltimore is a very vibrant city, and I believe Elijah Cummings at the time said that he preferred to look at it as an opportunity, which it definitely is. Now, there's an open question as to whether Elijah Cummings actually lives in Baltimore. He does own 2 houses in Baltimore, which he rents. He claims that one of those houses is his primary residence. But in Baltimore and in Maryland, the rules for actually claiming something as your primary residence are looser than the rules in Somalia for marrying your brother. So it's not entirely clear where anybody in Baltimore lives. Thus, the current mayor was actually at one point in trouble. Yes, that's right. Benny was in trouble because at one point he was accused of actually having a primary residence in Baltimore in which he was not perhaps actually living, where he was actually living in a official primary residence in Harford County. This became a bit of a scandal, became more of a scandal when the house that he claimed that he was living in Baltimore turned out to have been bought with federal grant money meant for low-income people. But did I mention that Baltimore is a very vibrant city? It's just vibrating all over the place. It has vibrating a lot of its politicians into prison and sometimes back into public office when out of prison. Thus, Mayor Dixon, now I'm going to try to keep all the mayors of Baltimore in order. This is like a fun children's game that they play in Baltimore where they try to list all the indicted mayors in one breath. So Mayor Dixon, who came before, no, sir, I'm getting confused already. Before the current mayor, before that mayor, you had Mayor Dixon. And Mayor Dixon was forced to step down as part of a plea agreement after she was caught stealing from poor children. She was caught stealing Toys R Us gift cards meant for poor children because she is a really, truly lovely person. And Elijah Cummings, Representative Elijah Cummings, who is a great American hero, according to the media, said that she had offered a great deal of history of public service to the city, which included stealing gift cards and toys meant for poor children because in Baltimore, that is what they call public service. When you steal toys from poor children, it's public service. Did I mention that Baltimore is a very vibrant city? It's so vibrant. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track here, but when you're just diving into a rich metropolis with a rich history and culture like Baltimore, it's so easy to get confused. Do you know what Baltimore's current motto is? It's that it's the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner. Now, is that because Baltimore is a very patriotic place? No, it's because Baltimore has tried every other possible motto. One of its famous mottos was Charm City. Charm City sounds so lovely. But in Baltimore, they have a great sense of humor in Baltimore. So in Baltimore, what they do is they take the motto, the official motto, and they make it a little bit more accurate. So what they did with Charm City was they took off a C and they called it Harm City, and it was much more accurate at that point. And then for a while, they tried to plaster a new model, the city that reads on every single bench, because Baltimore has a fantastic illiteracy rate. Its illiteracy rate is almost as good as its murder rate. So I don't know if one has some contributing factor to the other. I would suspect that there probably is a contributing factor there, but I wouldn't want to speculate too much. But yes, so for a while they did call it the city that reads because Baltimore specializes in magical wishful thinking. Much like a child's wishful imagination, they thought that if they changed the motto to the city that reads, that people would immediately learn how to read, and instead they just kept shooting each other. By the way, just because I'm so enthusiastic about Baltimore, I just have to mention the fact that in Baltimore, it's not just that the homicide rate is going up, but the number of people who are shot in the head and killed is also going up because, it's Charm City, it's the city that reads, it's so vibrant. You can't just imagine a vibrant city without a whole lot of people being shot in the head. Anyway, so it was for a while the motto was the city that reads, and then people changed it around to the city that bleeds, which is more accurate because so many people were just being shot in the head. Anyway, so none of those models worked very well. I think they tried a number of other models. Those models didn't work very well either, so they went over to Baltimore, birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner, which you cannot argue with. It's inarguable. You can't do anything with that model except point out that it's not remotely relevant to Baltimore as it is now. I would love to live in the Baltimore where the Star-Spangled Banner was born. I would not really want to live in the current Harm City or the city that bleeds. But anyway, it's not at all clear whether Elijah Cummings actually lives in Baltimore because until recently, at least he and his wife, who runs a nonprofit whose function is somewhat unclear. It's the Global Policy Solution Center, the Solutions Policy Global Center, some random combination of those words scrambled together. But anyway, she took contributions for a nonprofit from companies that had business before her husband's house committee. And then her nonprofit paid her for-profit consult $250,000 in consulting and management fees. So, she's a very industrious lady. And it appears that she is the owner of a very nice Victorian house in Washington, D.C., which they recently sold for, I believe, around $900,000, $880,000, something like that. And I rather suspect that's where they've been living for a while now, because really Elijah Cummings' job is in D.C., and she has a consulting firm in D.C. And I rather think they were very much enjoying the D.C. lifestyle and trying to avoid Baltimore, except when one of the houses that Elijah Cummings owned caught on fire, which was very, very tragic. But he was nowhere near at the time, but he was on his cell phone in the house, and then he probably went home to his very nice Victorian home in Washington, D.C. Anyway, did I mention that Baltimore is a very vibrant city? Because it is an absolutely very vibrant city, and the number of people being shot in the head is increasing. The illiteracy rate is probably also going up, but nobody can tell because nobody can read. And if you insult Baltimore, if you notice that it's overrun by rats and by Democrats, and by some rats who are Democrats, you are probably racist. Now, granted, the victims of all this are largely black people. For example, of the 100 and I believe 91 people were shot. I mean, the numbers are probably going up. There's a nice Baltimore Sun site that tracks the number of people who have been shot and where they've been shot and how they've been shot. But of the 181 or so people who have been shot, I believe 118 are African American. That's above the proportion in the city. And it suggests that the largest beneficiaries of Baltimore being a very vibrant place, run by very corrupt politicians, are not black people so much. So if there's anybody who's a racist, perhaps it's the Democrats who decided that maybe they should turn over the city of Baltimore, the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner, Charm City, the city that can't read. Maybe you should turn it into a hopeless, rat-infested, disease-infested disaster area run purely for the benefit of Democrats. By the way, I mentioned that Representative Elijah Cummings' net worth is in the $1 to $2 million range. That's not exactly the income level over in Baltimore. That's a whole lot more money than most people in Baltimore make. Elijah Cummings' salary doesn't quite explain that kind of money, but it seems that he made some very wise investments in Baltimore real estate, which he may or may not live in, and he made some very wise investments in D.C. real estate. And if you're going to live in Baltimore, which is a very vibrant city, you should probably invest in real estate in Washington, D.C., so you don't actually have to live in Baltimore. And that's all I have to say about Baltimore, which is a very vibrant city, which I will try to avoid visiting, which my wife will avoid visiting, even though she loves America very much because it is so vibrant. Thank you very much for listening, and have a good night.